So in the last video, I talked about who I thought were the winners for the 2017 NFL Draft. And in this video, I'm going to talk about the losers. And even though I thought a lot of teams did at least okay or adequate for themselves, some teams did very good for themselves, some teams were outstanding in their performances, there were still some teams that lagged a little bit behind the curve. Some teams that I questioned their philosophy and their approach, and one team in particular out of Chicago. But in general, even for some of the teams that I put down as losers, is part, I think, as a reflection of the talent in this draft. Outside of one team, in general, I look at it and I say that even then, I don't know that they did that poorly. It's just somebody's got to be losers. Not everybody can be winners. I'm just saying. So let's go ahead and talk about who I thought were the biggest losers in the 2017 NFL Draft. And I just realized, even though somebody pointed out last time, that I still haven't changed the calendar from March. Time to get on board with May. How about that? I will do that after this video. Promise you, swear to God, hope to cry. All right, so before I talk about the losers, I will point out one team that I thought had the riskiest draft of everybody. And it'll either be a draft that really takes them to another level, or it's just a draft that becomes potentially a total wash and a complete suckfest, and that's the Cincinnati Bengals. In my mind, they massively gambled taking John Ross, number 9 overall. He has the speed to indicate he should be a top 10 pick in the NFL draft, and he plays a premium position. However, he also has the injury history enough with his knees, his shoulder. God damn it, even his record-setting run at the 40 at the Combine, he couldn't get through that without freaking cramping up. He's got the type of injury history that you want to put a medical red flag on him and take him completely off of your draft board. He has explosive speed, perhaps surpassed only by his explosive ability to get hurt. And get hurt seriously, too. Talk about a guy with torn ACLs and all this other crap. I mean, and he's still that fast, which is what's crazy, but what happens if he has another major one? And based off of his previous history, he might very well be due for another one. And what happens if he does? It was a massive gamble by the Bengals. And maybe they felt they were in a position where they had to gamble. And I feel like they gambled a lot in this draft. But I don't know that in this draft class that was as good as it was, that you needed to gamble as much as they did. Like you look at round 2, for example. They take Joe Mixon. They trade back with the Vikings. The Vikings take Galvan Cook. And the Bengals take Joe Mixon. Personally, if I was going to gamble on the running back in round 2, I'd rather have Galvan Cook because I think Cook is still a superior prospect. Even if you take any and all of Joe Mixon's off-the-field stuff off the table, and you even factor in some of the concerns about Dalvin Cook off the field, I just felt Dalvin Cook was a superior prospect, a more explosive player, and a more well-rounded player. Not to crap on Mixon as a talent, because from a pure talent standpoint, I feel like he's still a first-round talent. He's uber talented, but he's also super stupid. When you look at an organization with a history of taking a lot of these guys, the Frosty Ruckards of the world, the Chris Henrys of the world, the Vontaze Burficts of the world, bringing in Pac-Man Jones, and in some cases it has worked, but in some cases you're bringing in some of these questionable type of personalities and characters in your locker room. It's no wonder that sometimes you have some issues and problems with the locker room and the discipline with these guys on the field. Did you really need to bring in another guy in Joe Mixon who has some borderline Lawrence Phillips tendencies? This draft class was too good at the running back position, and again, you were in a position originally to just take Dalvin Cook. Why didn't you just take Dalvin Cook when he was a better prospect? That was a massive risk. I'm all for Joe Mixon getting a chance in the NFL. I wouldn't have touched him until day 3. I figured somebody was going to touch him on day 2. I just don't know if this was right for the Bengals. Then in round 3, they took Jordan Willis, who I questioned his fit in their 4-3 defense. He's a guy that has explosive athleticism in a straight line, but nowhere else. Not a guy that, even though his numbers indicate he makes a certain amount of plays, really doesn't make many plays at all. Then in the 4th round, you take another edge rusher in Carl Lawson, who's a questionable fit for your system. These are 2 guys you're talking about primarily probably as situational type of guys which is okay to a point. But again, with Willis, does his athletic talent really translate to the NFL? Carl Lawson, talking about John Ross and his propensity for getting hurt. It was great that Carl Lawson got through 2016 relatively healthy, but frankly, even though he tested all right at the combine, he did not look like the same player on the football field last season. And it was the first healthy season he had in, 3 damn years? This was a massive gamble of a draft for the Bengals. And it either pays off massively well and they go to another level with guys like John Ross and Joe Mixon really adding some life and firepower and explosiveness to that offense, or this is a draft you're going to look back at for the Bengals in 4 years and you're going to sit there and say, this is why you don't always gamble to this degree on these type of guys, because it could backfire. Only time will tell, but I just wanted to call that out. Let's move on to the actual losers, because there were some. I'll look at some of the guys, the underclassmen that declared for this draft. You have quite a number that didn't get drafted at all. I think it's ridiculous to declare for a draft if you're not even going to get drafted. And they give you grades for the draft advisory board. You know, if you were going to get drafted, they probably tell you. Then maybe I understand declaring even if you're not a first or second round talent. But some of these guys, it just seems like they can't wait to get out of school. They get this kind of delusion of grandeur of the NFL, and then they go and don't get drafted. And most of them are never heard from again. It should be a cautionary tale, but it's not, and some guys will do this every year. And I look particularly at quarterbacks like Brad Kaya and Jerrod Evans, 2 guys that have some talent, 2 guys that had absolutely zero damn business, even in a weak quarterback class, declaring for this draft. Brad Kaya reeked of day 3 talent all along, and he ultimately got taken towards the tail end of round 6. Not even round 4 or 5, round 6. Maybe it would have been better for Kaya to stay another year at Miami under Mark Richt and stay out of this draft class. Now, the next year's draft class is vastly superior at the quarterback position, true. But if Kaya worked on his game and improved in some of his deficiency areas, maybe he goes from being a 6th-round pick to being a 3rd or 4th-round type of guy. But in this draft, he was a 6th-round pick, and he's going to have to work to beat out Jake Rudock for the number 2 spot behind Stafford in Detroit. And then Jerrod Evans, a kid who has some intriguing upside and some potential, but is perhaps several years away from really being able to realize that at the NFL level, inexplicably declared for the draft after transferring, I think, from Air Force to Virginia Tech. He was a guy I thought that would have been better served going back another year, same type of deal. Maybe he could have been, a 3rd, 4th, 5th-round type of guy. But a type of quarterback that a team would have had something invested in him, at least in terms of a mid-round draft pick. Now you're talking about a guy that went undrafted, and he'll be a camp body. And his talent is better than being a camp body. But these are 2 guys that I thought really, really screwed themselves over massively, frankly, by not going back to school. And we see it happen every year. Some guys make the right decision, some do not. And another guy that I don't think made the right decision was Desmond King. He was a guy that you were talking about in the 2016 draft when the defensive back class wasn't as good. Maybe a 1st, maybe 2nd-round type of talent. He goes back for another year, as so often is the case. These guys go back for another year. And scouts and people start to pick holes in your game. They start to kind of pick apart what you do. They find more reasons to find more film, to find more negatives about you, and you end up getting taken in the 5th round. Desmond King, maybe he got his degree at Iowa, and that's great, but he cost himself a ton of money, in my opinion, by going back to school in 2016 instead of declaring for last year's draft. And I don't know if he'll ever actually recoup that money. So those are some guys that you look at. A couple underclassmen screwed themselves, but on the flip side, a guy that should have declared that ultimately didn't, and it really affected where he ended up going in the draft, in my opinion. But on to the teams that were losers. I look at the Seattle Seahawks, and I'm all for giving teams the benefit of the doubt when they've earned it to a certain point, and definitely John Schneider and Pete Carroll and the operation they run in Seattle with the back-to-back Super Bowl appearances, the Super Bowl championship, the sustained run of success they've had for half decade plus now, they get some benefit of the doubt. There is no question. But just because you get some benefit of the doubt does not mean that you have carte blanche forever to not get any criticism or anybody questioning maybe what you did. Like, you look at the Seahawks, and they traded entirely out of the first round again. They didn't do it last year, but they have a history in recent years of trading out of round number 1. And to me, that's foolhardy in a salary cap era, because even if you think that, hey, instead of getting this guy at 26, I can still get him at 34 or 35, you're also talking about if you think he's a first-round talent and you take him at the beginning of round number 2, if you want to keep him around long-term, you have to sit there and consider paying him a big-time extension 3 or 4 years in, as opposed to if he's a first-round pick, you have up to 5 years of team control. If you so wanted, you could keep him for 5 years before you'd even get to the point of having to give him a contract extension or put a franchise or transition tag on him or whatever the hell. But I don't always like, in this salary cap era, trading out of round number 1. I know a lot of fans and media types love to talk about getting the additional draft pick currency, getting the additional draft picks. And sometimes that works. But sometimes it's better to just sit your ass there and take the guy in round 1, because it buys you more time and it buys you more team control. And it kicks the ball down the road in terms of having to potentially give these guys big money. And for a team like Seattle, who pays a lot of stars a lot of money, that type of salary cap flexibility to me is invaluable. Sure, you're going to pay him a little bit less over 4 years as a second rounder than you would in the first 4 years as a first rounder, but it's all about that bigger picture. So they traded down multiple times, got out of round 1. They pass on Cam Robinson, who I thought would have been a really solid choice for them, getting somebody that can actually play offensive tackle at the NFL level. They pass on Forrest Lamp, who would be a massive upgrade on the interior of that offensive line. Or if you want to get froggy and talk about getting a difference maker at a skill position, the Seahawks passed on Galvan Cook, and they ended up massively reaching on Malik McDowell. I called the dude McGriddle for a fucking reason. And I thought it was interesting. I even saw a report somewhere that not everybody in the Seahawks front office in the building was sold on Malik McDowell. Like, he was somewhat of a polarizing prospect even for them. Look, dude has massive athletic talent and massive upside. And if I could count on somebody to potentially get it out of him, it's Pete Carroll and his staff would be one of those teams that I would count on to potentially get it out of him. And with the type of personality that Malik McDowell has and kind of the way he conducts and carries himself, I'd have much more faith in a Pete Carroll getting it out of him, frankly, than I would a Bill Belichick. But with that said, in such a good draft in general, did you really need to reach on a dude like this? And I'm sorry, the dude was a reach, period. And if you were going to reach for him, why not just take him at the tail end of round number 1? Because that way you potentially get that 5th year of control on him. That way you could get additional picks, so that way you get additional picks for day 2 or day 3. You know, you get to a point in time where you have to take a step back and look at the Seahawks and start to question the approach a little bit in the draft. Because when you look at most of all the key players, all the big name stars, where have they come from? They have come from drafts going back 5, 6, 7 damn years ago. You know, the guys like the Richard Shermans, the Cam Chancellors, the Bobby Wagners, the Russell Wilsons of the world, the undrafted guys like a Doug Baldwin, trading away first-round picks like they did for Percy Harvin, and that didn't work, like they did for Jimmy Graham, and that kind of worked. But where is the impact to come out of the draft in recent years? You know, Earl Thomas was a first-round pick going back to 2010. Michael Bennett and Cliff Averill were free agent additions. You could say somebody like Frank Clark, okay, that's one guy, and he was round 2. You can really get concerned about the fact that in terms of stars, they really haven't drafted a star since 2012. Now, you could say part of that is picking low in the draft every year, and you can maybe buy that to a degree, but some of that is just flat out bullshit, because you can find stars all throughout the draft every year. It always works out that way. The Seahawks, in my estimation, the best way I can think about it, haven't drafted a star since 2012. This team is getting older than people want to give it credit for in a hurry. You can't continue to kind of go with this shotgun blast type of, we're going to acquire a ton of picks and go here, and get some role players. At some point in time, you got to get some difference makers. You got to get some impact players. And you got to get them in the right spots. And I understand the Seahawks have a philosophy and an approach, But, at some point in time, the Seahawks are going to get to that point where that philosophy and approach isn't going to help them anymore. And they're going to start becoming an overrated, overaged, overpaid, and overhyped team if they're not careful. If they have any more drafts like this, I think it very well is going to happen sooner than you might think. I look at the Arizona Cardinals. Speaking of the NFC West, I love Hassan Reddick. Do not get me wrong. I've been high on him throughout the entire draft process. He was, a top 10 or 11 prospect in this draft for me. I had him graded very high is my point. They got him at 13. No reach there. It was value, plain and simple. But at the end of the day, they didn't get a quarterback in this draft. And the Cardinals were another team that really needed to get a quarterback out of this draft. I understand it's a weaker quarterback class, but they didn't address the position at any point in time. Even when you're talking about heading into the process of, we need to get a quarterback at some point in time. We need a young quarterback. We need to think about the future. And they didn't do it. And then they're looking round 2, where you maybe could have stayed put and you take somebody like Davis Webb or Deshaun Kaiser, who are both there on the board, and you trade up and gave up multiple picks, including a 4th rounder in 2018, to go up and get Budda Baker. Budda Baker is a nice prospect. Budda Baker is not worth giving up that much to trade up in round 2 for, period. Especially when you had 2 quarterbacks that were more worth the gamble at this point in time based off of where your organization was. And you look at other players in the draft, you just don't see a lot of impact there outside of maybe a Dorian Johnson. It's a draft I felt like left a lot to be desired. You had one job, one goal, one mission to accomplish, and you failed to do so in this draft. And I look at this Cardinals draft, and it's hard for me to see where they get a ton of impact that makes a difference for them in 2017, and then what happens to this organization going forward. Because if Carson Palmer gets another injury or has another bad year, now what the hell do you do? And you've given up a piece of draft currency for 2018 to go get a guy as a safety when I thought there were better defensive backs on the board at that point. Just saying. And then look at the New York Jets. I won't go too off on the Jets and their draft performance. Because, it's kind of one of those things where you do it almost every year. It becomes kind of repetition. It becomes, frankly, kind of old after a while. But their first round pick. While I feel Malik Hooker was the superior safety prospect in this draft, I understand at pick 6 why you would take Jamal Adams. I get why you would take Jamal Adams with the 6th pick. It is a further admission that Calvin Pryor was a bust. But I get why you look at Jamal Adams and you see a guy, you think he's going to be a Pro Bowl player. He's about as safe of a prospect in this draft as anybody, which is definitely true. He might not be the most spectacular, but he is really, really damn good. And he feels like an alpha dog type of leader in that locker room and on the field. I get all of that. But then you come back in the next round and you take another safety, and it wasn't even the best safety remaining on the board in Marcus May. I don't get it. I don't get it, especially taking a Marcus May, which very well might mean Jamal Adams has to play more of the free safety at the NFL level. And even though he has some of the ability to play free safety, I still think Jamal Adams is best suited as a Landon Collins type of super stud strong safety. You took the 2nd best safety in this draft at number 6, then followed it up in round 2 by taking another safety, and yet again, continuing a trend that's been going on since 2010, this is the 8th straight year this dumb dick Jets organization has spent 2 of their first 3 picks on the defensive side of the ball. How many times have I said this about the Cleveland Browns over the years, and frankly the New York Jets? The pure definition of insanity is making the same mistakes over and over and over again and expecting it to end up any different. Every year the Jets spend 2 of their first 3 picks on the goddamn defensive side of the ball, and every year they still are the fucking Jets. The hell is the thought process here? And then when we get into round 2, you're sitting there and you've got a chance to take Galvan Cook and you pass on him for Marcus May. If there was ever a Tropic Thunder definition type of moment of going full retard in a draft, this felt like it. You had Galvan Cook fall into your lap, a guy that a few months ago some people would have made the argument he could have went 6th overall. Now you've got him here at the early portion of round 2 and you pass on him? You pass on him? What in the hell is wrong with you? And if you were going to pass on Dalvin Cook in round number 2, and you were going to take a safety in round number 2 any damn ways, why the hell didn't you just take Christian McCaffrey in round number 1? Or if you didn't want Dalvin Cook because of off-the-field concerns, why not get an even more explosive offensive weapon in Curtis Samuel in round number 2? You did not address offensive line once. You managed to be unable to trade Sheldon Richardson and Calvin Pryor. This is a team that still doesn't know what the fuck they're doing. Unless their whole goal is one thing, is to either suck for Sam, meaning Sam Darnold, or job for Josh in Josh Allen for the 2018 draft. Everything that you've seen out of the Jets this offseason, and even frankly with this draft, is all about fucking tanking and trying to go 1-15 or 0-16 in 2017. Which at this point in time, Jets fans, might not be the worst thing for you. And if this draft is another stepping stone towards accomplishing that, then that might make the Jets winners in the long term. But right now, even when you look at guys like Ardarius Stewart and Hanson, they addressed receiver. But remember a couple of years ago when they addressed receiver, and who did they take? Jalen Saunders and Shaq Evans. How'd that work out for them? Now, I like Ardarius Stewart and Chad Hanson more. But Jesus H, this organization legitimately thought Marcus May was a superior NFL prospect to both Dalvin Cook and Curtis Samuel. And on top of that, even somebody like a Joe Mixon. Just insane to me. Didn't really accumulate anything in terms of draft pick currency going into next year. Just another poorly run draft by a dumb organization. But speaking of dumb organizations, leave it to my Chicago Bears to be the runaway losers in the clubhouse in the 2017 NFL Draft. When you see several unnamed executives talking about they have no clue what the hell the Bears were doing, they thought the Bears botched this draft, that tells you a little something. When you get a report shortly after the draft from Peter King for Monday Morning Quarterback, who was embedded with John Lynch and the 49ers in their draft room throughout the process, and he talks about the fact that the 49ers, outside of one guy there, but John Lynch in particular, thought that Bears had the hots for Solomon Thomas when they wanted to trade up to number 2, and they were legitimately floored when they took Trubisky at number 2. It tells you all you need to know about how this draft went. You'll get some of the defenders talking about, well, they didn't give up nearly as much to get a guy like Trubisky as, let's say, the Chargers did to move up from 3 to 2 in a similar draft in 1998. That is true. But at that time, Ryan Leaf was thought of as a real deal type of prospect to the point where everybody knew Peyton Manning was legit. Peyton Manning had franchise Hall of Fame quarterback written all over him coming out of college, period. But there were some people, some teams that thought maybe Ryan Leaf was the better talent and might be the better NFL player. So we have to provide that full context. Who in the fuck other than the Chicago Bears thought that Mitchell Trubisky was worth the number 2 overall pick in this draft? The Cleveland Browns didn't. Because if they did, they would have just taken him at number 1. I don't care how talented you think Myles Garrett is. If you think Trubisky is that dude, you take him over the defensive end. And if anybody thinks otherwise, they're stupid. And frankly, the 49ers, same thing. And you can say, well, we're talking about the Browns or 49ers. Well, you actually look at the draft performance this year for the Browns and 49ers, and it actually looked like they knew what the fuck they were doing. And here's Ryan Pace in his 3rd draft. He's got experience doing this now. He's had a little bit of success doing this now. It's like he just couldn't wait. He had a premium pick. He felt like he had to draft a quarterback. And once he identified a guy he could kind of think was palpable to him, he was desperate to get him. Desperate teams do desperate, dumb things. And the Bears did a desperate, dumb thing by moving up 1 pick to get a guy that most likely would have been there at number 3 anyways. And for those of you that want to say, well, the 49ers had other offers, you'll notice how Peter King really didn't mention any other concrete offers. It was because the Bears were actually at a point where they were really competing against themselves. Sure, John Lynch kept open dialogue with other teams, but if anyways, that was a thing to keep the pressure on the Bears and get them to believe that they were competing against somebody else other than their damn selves. Like John Lynch is probably calling somebody else like the Cleveland Browns, and they're probably yucking about it. Unbelievable. This Chicago Bears team spent the second overall pick on a quarterback that really lacks for special traits. Now, he can make some big money NFL type of throws. There is no question. But he's not the biggest guy. He doesn't have superior arm strength. He's a decent athlete, but he's not a special athlete. He lacks in experience. His pocket presence is suspect. His field vision is somewhat suspect, or at least I'll say inconsistent. And he has a tendency, see if this reminds you of the past 8 years Chicago, to where if he struggles early, he could fold like a house of cards. Is that really the type of guy you want to take number 2 overall? And then even throughout the rest of the draft, there was just lots of risk with small school, injured, and inexperienced guys. Now, I will say, I love the pick of Adam Shaheen, and it's ironic. I'm in the freaking minority, I think, when it comes to him. I like the pick of Eddie Jackson, but I can understand the picks of Tarek Cohen and Jordan Morgan. But again, you are talking about throughout the rest of this draft, you took a guy from Division II, a safety from Alabama who missed most of the year with a leg injury, a running back from the secondary level of Division I, then what cuts down whatever the hell in that like Division II as well. You're gambling on all these small school athletes and on the inexperienced quarterback. You lost a third-round pick in 2018. You can say, well, they picked up a fourth round. Well, that's still a net fucking loss. All the while, anybody with a brain and eyeballs could see that the 2018 quarterback class was vastly superior. I would have rather, with the Bears already having paid Mike Glennon a ton of money as a one-year kind of prove-it deal based off the structure of the deal, to have held their horses, taken a quarterback somewhere else in this draft, maybe like Nate Peterman in round 5, and take your chances in 2018. And at that point in time, you're actually going to have some dudes that are worth a damn, that if you want to trade up, you could argue that it's worth trading away a lot more because you're going to get a lot more of a player. Now, I hope to God at the end of the day that Trubisky is that dude for Chicago, because I've been waiting a long, long time for this. And I do not want this dude to fail, because if he fails, it is going to be several more wasted seasons for all of us as Chicago Bears fans and for the Chicago Bears organization. It'll be several years more after that before we could really take this damn organization seriously. They've already wasted enough time in my life the past 8 years with Cutler and the Grossman's experience before that and so on and so forth. I don't want Trubisky to waste 3, 4, 5 more years of my life as a Bears fan. Only got, a finite amount of time on this planet. I'm tired of watching crappy quarterback play in Chicago. But when you objectively look at this draft, not just to shit on it, or not just to defend it because you're some fucking Bears fanboy that just wants to believe that it's good and that makes it okay. When you step back from all the emotion, the bias, and the bullshit. Like I said, I want nothing more than this draft to be successful. I'd rather be wrong than be right. Believe me. Especially coming off of 8 years of the Jay Cutler experience. But when you look at this draft, and you've got so many other teams questioning what they did, when you look at the way it was pieced together, either the Chicago Bears know something that absolutely nobody else does, or they ran this draft like they have no clue what the hell they're doing. And at this point in time, it felt like they got played by the draft. They didn't play the draft. And that's a big difference. Again, I hope I'm wrong, but the way it stands right now, I think beyond question, the biggest losers in the 2017 NFL draft were my Chicago Bears.